Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me today in the storage with the Shmeemobiles. But I'd like to take you for a walk down memory lane, going back 15 years through all of the cars that I have owned to date. An entire history of the Shmeemobiles, if you will, from my first car through to my first sports car, first supercar, first hypercar, some of the cars that I've owned in different countries, and some of the memories that have stood out along the way, and some of the unique things that I've done to them as well. So to do this, and to make it even cooler, I'm going to be joined by my friend Raz, Mr. AMG from Remove Before Race, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about in just a moment. Let's do it then. All of the Shmeemobiles, all of the cars that I have ever owned. Thinking back over my car history has reignited some memories for me, quite exciting actually, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with you now. But as I said, to go through all of the cars, we are going to be joined by my friend Raz. So Raz, come on in.
Hey buddy, sorry I'm late.
No worries, good to have you.
Thank you. And guys, today is a super special episode on Shmee 150, so I was more than happy to lend some typical RBR magic to the storytelling aspect. But as far as the storytelling goes, I'm going to leave that to the main man.
Well, let me give you this, if you don't mind.
Take that and I'll see you guys later.
To take it all back then to my first ever car, back in 2005, a Renault Clio 1.2 Dynamique. It had a whopping 72 brake horsepower, but that was a car that I was so unbelievably excited about, the opportunity to have freedom and go on and take on the world, driving behind the wheel of my own car. I had it for about 3.5 years, drove over 30,000 miles with it. Of course, my first road trips, first time going out off to see friends across the country, first time really having that opportunity to explore. It was the first car I ever slept in at a friend's birthday party, and I also took it when I spent an extended period down in the French Alps training to become a ski instructor. So I had a ski rack with skis on the top. I thought that was super, super cool. Now, car number 2 was a bit of a stopgap before the third that was already on order. So having trained to be a ski instructor, I went out with a friend to New Zealand, where we spent a couple of months, and out there working as ski instructors needed a car and bought a Subaru Leone station wagon from 1987. It was from May 87, in fact, a couple of months older than I am myself, but it was the perfect car. We could throw skis in the back. It was four-wheel drive with skinny tyres. Nothing was going to stop that car going anywhere. But it was upon my return from New Zealand that car number 3 arrived, my BMW 1 Series. Now, I make no secret that even back when I bought my Clio, my dream car at the time was a 1 Series, and it arrived in the form of a 123D SE Coupe. It was the first, or one of the first, of the BMW 1 Series coupes in Alpine White. Again, a car that I used for many adventures across Europe, for driving down to the French Alps, even though it was rear-wheel drive, the first time that I'd put winter tyres on a car, and appreciated quite how beneficial they actually were. But again, a car that I have so many memories even to this day, driving about 30,000 miles, but things that I just won't forget. A very, very important car for me. But then we move on to car number 4, which I'm going to say was my first sports car, an Audi S5 Cabriolet. It was just after the S5 Coupe had come out with the 4.2-litre V8. For the Cabriolet, they actually put in a supercharged 3-litre V6. It was a big topic of conversation, but I thought the car was exceptionally elegant. Even back then, actually, I ordered it in an Audi individual paint colour, Sepang Blue from the R8. It was a colour I absolutely loved and felt I had to have on my S5. Of course, there was an upcharge for it, but you kind of get the theme for why I quite like colours. I've always had that within me. After that, though, came a very serious sports car, and being a Brit, it had to be an Aston Martin, a V8 Vantage Roadster. It was in glacial blue, a lovely, lovely colour with a sandstorm beige interior. A car, again, that opened up an oral symphony with its 4.7-litre naturally aspirated V8. I was lucky to buy one of the facelift versions, so it had an updated interior. That was really the car that got me attending the events, opened up my eyes to the supercar world, and of course filming these videos which I'm uploading now on an almost daily basis. But alongside the Aston Martin, I bought for the first time a second car. The first time I owned 2 cars at the same time, and that was a Mini Countryman Cooper S All 4. This was, of course, my interpretation of a practical car. If you have the Aston Martin, you can't use it for everything, not to mention the fuel consumption, and slightly overexerting myself at the time financially for the repayments against the car, of course, as well, so the Mini made sense to have alongside it. However, I was keen for something else, but in the meantime, to ensure I could save up the funds, I said goodbye to the Aston Martin, a sad farewell, and picked up a BMW Z4 30i S-Drive to have in the meantime. One of my favourite trips was taking the silver Z4 along with the Mini down to Monaco for about 5 or 6 weeks in the summer to film plenty of videos and to also have a pretty epic time. But it was upon return in late 2012 that I think the car most of you will remember as pretty much the first true Shmeemobile arrived, and that was my 2010 Audi R8 V10 Spider. The car was in Sepang Blue, the colour that I mentioned earlier I had chosen for my S5 Cabriolet. That was the factory colour. This was a car I bought with a couple of thousand miles on it, but it was to become a bit of a project, a travelling machine, a car that would feature just about everywhere. We wrapped it in midnight purple, gave it a Quicksilver exhaust. I travelled all around Europe chasing the Gumball 3000, up to Finland, down through Estonia, Latvia, just about everywhere, and built up a lot of memories over about 25,000 miles, again, driving in my Audi R8, a car that I'm not going to be forgetting, particularly because whenever we went off on an adventure, that car did not have much luggage space. It was a bit of a nightmare to try and get anything in. However, alongside the Audi, the Mini had made its way to a new home along with the Z4 before, and I chose to add another second car, which was an Abarth 595C Turismo, convertible Abarth 595, a very fun car to drive around London, of course using it mostly for short trips in the red and grey paintwork, a car that was a lot of fun, to be honest. I actually missed that car a little bit. But it was after this that I would say I truly got to enter and experience the supercar world. I had had a progression up through horsepower categories, we could say, from the 72 of the Clio up to about 204 with the BMW, 333 in the S5, 420 in the Aston, 520 in the Audi R8. Then it was time to go into the sixes, 625 horsepower from the McLaren MP4 12C. My first McLaren, my first of what has become a line to follow, and I would say my first true supercar experience. A carbon fibre tub, a massive amount of power, a ridiculous shove in the back, but also an opportunity to properly experience the supercar side of the world, the automotive world, to go to things like the Nürburgring, to drive it at pure McLaren track days and events at Spa-Francorchamps, and to have the most incredible time as well. The McLaren 12C, I had a car that was flawless throughout my ownership. I think I did, well, the best part of 10,000 miles in a handful of months. One of the fun things, though, alongside the 12C, is that I also had the Morgan three-wheeler, the Morgan Shmee-wheeler, a car that was so unbelievably fun. Yes, quirky in the way that it looked, in the way that it drove, in the fact that it was open, tiny on the roads, but a car that was awesome. I loved driving that. The fact that everybody responded positively to it. Kids, adults, grown-ups, you name it, everybody loved the three-wheeler, and I thoroughly enjoyed driving it. I only had about 1,000 miles or so in total behind the wheel, but alongside the 12C, that was pretty cool. Also wrapped in the same look by the guys at Dub Customs. Yeah, the three-wheeler has a fond spot in my heart. But it was then that that car departed, the 12C also departed and upgraded to the natural successor, the McLaren 650S Spider. Now this was a bright colour, mantis green, a car that I actually unwrapped as a bit of a viral for a Christmas video back at the time, January or December 2014 I should say, January 2015 I had it out on the roads. The McLaren 650S continued where the 12C had left off, being used in so many ways, again a car that featured heavily across the channel with the different events. It was after this though that I sold the Abarth and the 650S, and things got very crazy very, very quickly. I had announced that my McLaren 675 LT Coupe was coming, the hardcore version, but that wasn't the next in the garage. Before that, as a bit of a surprise, I revealed my Ferrari FF, my first Ferrari. Of course, it's been upgraded in the garage since to the GTC4 Lasso, but the FF was the ultimate, I think, support supercar, if we can call it that, to travel as a convoy, to take the luggage that couldn't fit into the proper supercar, and just to have as a daily car as well, despite having a V12 and not being the most fuel efficient in the world. So the FF arrived. About a week later, the 675 LT arrived in cerulean blue, the famous MSO cerulean blue that has been in the garage through many cars since, of course being a painted colour, but reminiscent of the wrap we had seen on the 12C that I had before. But this was then joined a few days later as another surprise by my Porsche Cayman GT4. That was in sapphire blue. I had ordered the car about, 6-9 months before, put in the specification, obviously kept it completely under wraps. I went on to wrap the car, to put on a Martini livery, and then ultimately to wrap it completely as well for future events. The Cayman GT4, though, is a fantastic driving experience, one of my favourite cars actually to go out and drive, but this was the formation of the Blue Crew. The GT4, the 675 LT Coupe, and the FF, the three cars together, down for the ultimate carnage road trip around the south of France and Italy, all together, a time that, again, I am not going to forget in a hurry. However, things in the garage became slightly less blue with the arrival of one of the smallest cars that I've owned, the Schmini. It was one of the last of the Rover Minis. The classic Minis are 2001 in British racing green with the silver stripes, silver roof and mirrors. It had the sport pack with the wider arches and the bigger wheels. A lovely little thing, always greeted by smiles. A lot of fun to drive around London, to just potter about in. A car that I miss sorely, and one day I hope there'll be another classic Mini to join the garage. After that though, while it was still in the garage, the next arrival was something more in the hunt for practicality, the Ford Focus RS, the Mark III generation. Now I had actually at this time been allocated the slot for the new Ford GT despite having not yet announced it, but there was a lot of buzz around Ford performance. I had even driven a press Ford Focus RS down to the 24 Hours of Le Mans, where of course they were victorious with the GT-LM, but at this point I kind of thought it would be a good idea to add one to try it. I really enjoyed the drive, but I also had a need to keep a car up in Scotland where I was spending significant amounts of time and wanted something that was four-wheel drive and quite usable. So this was the perfect car. I went for the Mark III RS, and as you probably know, I've become rather fond of them and ended up having a few more in the garage since. So now we move on to the first of what I'm going to call the keepers of the Schmie-mobiles, the first car that I still have amongst the garage to this date, which was, or is, my McLaren 675 LT Spider in Orion purple. The first time that I had made my own colour for a car, deep midnight purple, rather like that of the R8 Spider, but also with the metallic flake in cerulean blue to match the LT Coupe, which had made way. I talked a bit myself with whether I could kind of have the LT Coupe and Spider together, but I had also popped in my name for what was called the P15. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So the LT Spider arrived, I absolutely fell in love instantly. In the first month or two, I drove about 5,000 miles around Europe with that thing. Some crazy journeys and adventures, and of course, almost 4 years on, still have it in the garage to this date. About 6 months later, though, arrived the next of the keepers, we could say, that's still here with me in the garage, the Aston Martin Vantage GT8, one of the last of the old-shaped Vantages, a tribute to me, to my old Vantage Roadster, the 4.7-litre naturally aspirated engine, only 150 units, in my iconic colour scheme, I think with the cobalt blue and the Gulf orange accents. But that big engine mated to a manual gearbox, a proper driver's car, full carbon body, absolutely love it. It's something that is so involving to get behind the wheel of that nothing else really comes close. I had enjoyed the experience of buying the Vantage GT8 so much that the next car to arrive was also an Aston Martin, the Vanquish Volante. Now, truth be told, I had actually gone out to look for a DBS, one of my favourite Aston Martins ever, but I ended up with the newer model, the Vanquish, an updated car with the 8-speed gearbox. We wrapped it, again, in the Schmie blue to look like the MSO cerulean blue. A fantastic car, one that, again, I really enjoyed on trips. We took it on a tour with the GT8 around Italy, had an awful lot of fun, and enjoyed that grumbly V12 a lot along the way too. And then next up came a car that I'm sure many of you will relate to the Schmie 150 channel with, the Mercedes-AMG GTR, my first Mercedes that has gone on to spawn quite a few more AMGs in the garage. A car that I owned for 2 years, collected with Nico Rosberg, took around the Nürburgring many times, VMAXed on the Autobahn, boosted the power with new turbos at Rentec, took on trips all around Europe. That car went everywhere, did everything, drove in deep snow, drove in perfect weather, did just about anything I could possibly want from it, was even wrapped in a wrap to look like Solar Beam Yellow, one of my favourite Mercedes colours as well. The colour launched on the SLS Black Series, which we can get onto shortly as well. But the AMG GTR was definitely, I think, a spark for me in terms of finding cars that I really, really enjoy. Now, alongside it came my first German acquisition to keep over in Germany on a German registration, and that was the Porsche 911 991.2 GT3 in Gelbgrün. PTS, paint to sample colour, a car that I went to see being assembled, being put together at Porsche exclusive manufacture. We got to see the various parts and be part of that process. And again, I actually drove that car a lot of miles, about 10,000 kilometers, 6,000 miles in only a handful of months before I got the phone call from Ford that a big deposit was needed. That was why I had to leave the garage sooner than I would have liked. And at the moment, I don't own a Porsche, but who knows what the future has in store as well. It was my second after the GT4, but we're now going to get on to a trio of Fords. The two Focus RSs, the Red Edition came first. The Focus RS Red Edition, one of 300 cars in the UK, and a car that has gone on to be, well, pretty heavily modified, as you probably know. Upgrades to the engine from Mountune, over 500 horsepower, the complete interior from Proto Trim, the carbon fibre on the exterior from Ventus Veloce, amidst plenty more updates that the car had. Then, having kind of done the double collection day, I picked up the Heritage RS, which I actually delayed slightly purely for the registration because I wanted to get a 68 on the number plate because it links back to 1968. The Heritage RS joined the garage, and then a few months later came the first of the big ones, the first car I think I had ever been as excited about as my first ever car, the Ford GT. The car paying tribute to Alan Mann Racing, wearing the liquid red with the man gold stripes. The car that I have since taken all around the United States of America, have driven on the Autobahns, have taken to Sardinia, have driven around the Nürburgring, Road Atlanta, Silverstone, and plenty of other racetracks. A car that I will keep forever if I can. It is a truly special machine. It looks stunning. It pays tribute to Ford's history back in the 1960s. It's just absolutely me in a car. But it was only 2 days later that the next car arrived in the garage, the McLaren Senna. The McLaren Senna, by far and away the most expensive car I've owned, the most powerful car I've owned, the most extreme car I've owned, and one that is a driving experience unlike anything else. It is not sanitized for road use, as they say. It is a car that is completely at home at track. It just happens to be able to wear a number plate as well. I've enjoyed taking the car around Spa, taking the car on a few different adventures and trips before, of course, it unfortunately got caught up in a little incident, but it's all back together, back on the road and ready for action too in the future. Getting closer to the modern day, my FF had gone, but it was upgraded in the garage to the Ferrari GTC 4 Lusso, the natural successor. After such an enjoyable experience with the FF, it was only going to be the case that the Lusso would arrive, a perfect car for road trips, for travelling around in, for a bit more elegance and style, while also being very sporty in the process. But after the Lusso came something a little bit different that I think took people by surprise. I'd owned a few quirky cars in the past, the three-wheeler, the classic Mini, but now it was time for a new Suzuki Jimny in kinetic yellow. The lovely little Jimny, it was a bit quirky. It was arriving a few months after the original intended delivery date, and as such, it did come a little bit too close to the next car. Its bigger brother, I think we could say, the Mercedes-AMG G63. As such, the Jimny made way. The G63 came in. Of course, it was topaz skin to match the colours of the McLaren Senna. It's also since been upgraded with an Akrapovic exhaust system, some Rentec remap and updates too, to basically make it a complete beast. A towing machine for some of the other cars, while also being a car that offers lots of practicality and almost, as I've discovered, great comfort for daily driving as well. A really, really all-round car that I enjoyed more than I thought I actually would. After the G63 came probably the most hyped car of the year, the new Toyota A90 Supra, and in particular the A90 Edition in the satin storm grey paintwork. A car that is truly special. There are only 24 of them in the entirety of the UK out of 90 in total that they made of the A90 Editions in the exclusive paintwork. A car that I was torn as to whether I should heavily modify it or keep it as a collector's piece as it was, not in the sense of never driving it and garage queening it. I'm not a big fan of that at all, but I think I've decided that I'm going to keep it as it is. It's a great daily car, a great car to just use, just drive. It's small, it's nimble, and it's great to get around with. After this, though, has come two more Mercedes AMGs. I say Mercedes AMGs. One, the Mercedes AMG GTR Pro, the natural successor to the AMG GTR. My car in Designo Diamond White. We put on the piano black stripes to make it a little bit different. One of only 750 cars in the world, but the natural successor to the AMG GTR I had enjoyed quite so much. A car with a layout and a configuration I love. Of course, the Pro being the ultimate in terms of track-focused variants. The car very much at home on a racetrack, which I had hoped to be able to do, but with a spanner in the works, that's been postponed until a slightly later date. But then the latest car to arrive, the latest Shmeemobile, a very similar concept, but the slightly previous iteration, the Mercedes-Benz SLS AMG Black Series. Collected in Himalaya Grey, but changing to be my choice of colour because this is my dream car, one of the permanent Shmeemobiles. It is going to be Mystic Blue when all is said and done. And I can't wait to see the final result of the car that will sit in and amongst the colourful skittles. But the Black Series and the GTR Pro very much complementing each other in terms of their similar driving style, but as part of a collection, two very rare, very, very special Mercedes cars. To touch on some of the cars that are going to be joining the Shmeemobiles in the future, some of the cars that I've announced, not necessarily in their final specifications, but we will have the BMW M8 Competition Coupe. We will also have, later this year, subject to production, the Mercedes AMG GTR Roadster, limited again to 750 cars. Later this year as well, over in the USA, I hope to take delivery of a Shelby GT500. That will eventually find its way back over to Europe after being used in America for a while first. And finally, the last car, hopefully in the future, we will have the arrival of the new TVR Griffith. We're still waiting for some news as to how TVR are getting on with the processes that are involved, but fingers crossed, it would be awesome to have the new Griffith in the garage. So I think that's all that's been announced so far, but how awesome has this been? Let's welcome Raz back in. Come on, Raz.
Hey man, my powers are dwindling. That was, but it was worth it. That was super cool.
That was awesome. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have enjoyed this kind of run through. I definitely couldn't have done it quite as well as you have.
My pleasure.
Oh, thank you for bringing that back. Appreciate it. So, well, appreciate that. Thank you ever so much.
No problem. See you later.
Well, we'll see you later. Yeah, so there we have it. A big thanks to Raz. Go check out his channel. I'll pop in the links down below if you'd like to go and see some of his amazing edits and things that he's doing, particularly around AMGs, which of course I have a bit of a soft spot for at the moment as well. But all of the Shmeemobiles then, back from my Renault Clio through to today, over 30 cars, over 15 years. It's been a bit of a wild ride for me going back through these memories, but thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed a little bit seeing the evolution as well and how it's all gone through time. But that's it for now, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.